and welcome to Grand Prix Portland. We are here for the next round here at in our feature match area, round 5, and we've got Sam Black, Matt Severa, and Gaudenis Vidugiris against Nikola, Vavra, Adam Koska, and David Mines. Now, in terms of the match that we're going to be starting with here, on the right of our screen, that is Sam Black. On the other side, we have Vavra there, and it looks like Black is up against a black deck, but his deck himself is 3 colors. A slightly daring choice for this format, right?
Yeah, one of these colors could be a splash. We're not really sure at this point. It could be, you know, a Merc Lurker off of the swamp there. It could be something like a couple Dauntless River Marshals with the island. We really don't know at this point. Wall of Essence is going to provide a great roadblock here, though, which can make the game go pretty long.
Yeah, Wall of Essence is an interesting one. I mean, defenders often performing the role of saying, the late game cards that I have in my deck, I'm going to get a chance to actually cast them. If I see a Wall of Essence, then that to me says, watch out once I hit 5-6 mana, because anything could happen. And it's a great roadblock for the likes of Child of Night and that Witch's Familiar that Vavra has started with.
Yeah, and it looks like Vavra's hand is nearly all land at this point also, so he's in kind of a rough spot here.
Yeah, not really able to get a huge amount of traction on this game. I mean, can you see whether or not those lands, if there's any that are... Is he in fact mono-black, or have we got something else going on here?
I see some plains as well.
I mean, I guess that Zothshade in itself helps maintain this illusion that he's mono-black. It's certainly at its best when you've just got black mana to activate it. But also, if you've not got any white cards to cast yet, there's no reason to give Sam Black the extra information of exactly what colors you're going to be playing with.
So I'm interested to see what kind of targets we have here.
Yeah, so Heliod's Pilgrim, it can search up any enchantment, and we can actually see there that within Sam Black's deck he's got another copy of it, but he's found a Stab Wound to start with. Stab Wound, an enchantment so powerful that it started at common in Return to Ravnica, now up to uncommon, -2/-2 to a creature, and at the beginning of the upkeep, that will deal 2 damage to the creature's controller, assuming the creature's still alive in the first place.
Yeah, a great answer to the Witch's Familiar we see there on the other side of the table.
Yeah, kind of ideal to just say, your Witch's Familiar, I'm going to make it into a 0/1, assuming that my principal path to victory is flyers. That 0/1 just not able to do anything of any worth whatsoever, apart from slowly but surely bleed its controller to death. So...
Could be a very strong Peel from Reality from Sam this turn as a potential card. We don't know if he has it in his hand or not, but given the amount of mana that he left up and the cards that are in play, that would be absolutely ideal here.
Yeah, anytime that you're able to bounce something that has a coming into play ability, it's obviously strong. Black there electing to let the Zothshade go unblocked and saying, you know what, I don't mind too much if you spend a bit of your mana just so I can take a bit more damage, because at least then you're not casting any other threats.
Stab Wound, Witch's Familiar is an excellent target for that, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Sam go ahead and begin the bleeding.
I mean, the other option, of course, I mean, he doesn't have to use it right now. The fact that he's shown it to Vavra means that it may impact on some other players, and Marked by Honor there, meaning that Heliod's Pilgrim suddenly a much more dangerous threat, going from being a 1/2 into being a 3/4 with Vigilance, able to quite happily attack and sit back on blocks if needed. I kind of like holding on to the Stab Wound here. I mean, what do you do if you're Vavra when you know that sooner or later that Stab Wound is going to come down? Does it impact on what creatures you end up playing?
I mean, it certainly can have an effect on the game. Right now, the way the board is, Witch's Familiar is so far and away the best target for Stab Wound that I can't imagine what he would play that could be worse for him to get Stab Wounded. I guess maybe something like Jalira, Master Polymorphist, if he's playing blue, but I really feel like it's an extremely difficult card to play around in any capacity. It's not an instant, so it's not going to make him, you know, use his combat tricks differently or anything like that. And here it seems like he just has a lot of land and is just dumping all of his mana into that Zothshade there. Yeah,
so Zothshade there attacking Sam Black down to 12 life, and Black here, he's got plenty of land to work with also. He makes sure that Vavra records down the life loss from everything that's happened in the last turn probably, and he's just figuring out exactly what to do this turn. 7 mana, 3 different colours, 4 cards in hand, plenty to work with. And I guess a question that Sam Black has is if you really chose to pump yours off change there rather than do anything else, what would be like? Where do you go? What does that say about the last card in Nikola Vavra's hand there?
Well, I mean, I would assume that either white is a splash and he doesn't have his second color yet, or his hand is all land. That would be my assumption at Sam Black.
In which case, this is the time for Sam Black to potentially strike with something.
Yes, but I mean, he might also be a bit flooded. I mean, we know he has the stab wound in hand, but he doesn't really have any reason to play it at this point.
So a Pillar of Light there, and once the first pump of his Offshade is resolved, that's going to exile the well, now 4/4, briefly 4/4, and means that Vavra not got a huge amount of action going on. Follows up with a Child of Night, so a pair of children there. Like between the two of them, they're able to block Heliod's Pilgrim if they wish, but yeah, this is a tricky spot for Nikola Vavra.
And again, he's choosing to just take the damage here. Doesn't want to trade those 2 cards for the 2 cards of his opponents. Heliod's Pilgrim, you know, it replaced itself already. If he does make that trade, then Sam can just put a stab wound on Witch's Familiar and watch his opponent bleed to death. But
so Vavra just organizing his lands there, trying to figure out what he's going to do. There has to be something pretty soon. And anytime you see your opponent fully tap out, yeah, Covenant of Blood there, not needing to convoke at all. That they're dealing 4 damage and potentially gaining Vavra 4 life. But it looks like stymied there by a quick response there from
Ephemeral Shields.
Ephemeral Shields of Sam Black there, yeah. So that Ephemeral Shields, it has Convoke. Again, Convoke not needed. Perfectly fine, just paying 2 mana to give target creature indestructible until the end of the turn. Plenty good enough. Doesn't stop the life gain, though.
No, it does not.
Stab Wound, as predicted, finally does end up on that, which is familiar. So Vavra's Life Turtle will be going down in 2-point increments for the time being. Slow and Steady does apparently win the race. We'll find out how accurate that saying is soon enough, I'm sure. But Sam Black, I mean, I always kind of feel like anytime you've got a really, really good player, my first inclination is to say, don't give them too much time. Don't let them have too many decisions, because the more decisions they make, the more they can leverage their skill against me. I feel like Sam Black being in a position where he can kind of sit back, not really worry too much about attacking, and gradually bleed Nikola Vavra to death is exactly the situation I would not want playing against a potential Hall of Famer in the future.
And now Heliod's Pilgrim from Vavra here. Let's see if it finds something a bit more powerful.
Well, it looks like the Stab Wound plan might be a popular one in this match. Both sides of the table saying, I'm black-white, I've got this Heliod's Pilgrim, I've got this Stab Wound, we're going to make something special happen here.
It seems like this is very mirror-esque. I mean, we're seeing 2 white-black decks. I think Sam has Covenant of Blood in his own hand.
And something that we saw quite a bit in Ravnica block, I'll be intrigued to see what, or Return to Ragnarok block, I'm sorry, I'm intrigued to see if we see it happen at any point here, is at some point you end up having to use a removal spell on your own creature. It's not big, it's not clever, but sometimes it has to be done to win the game. And when Stab Wound is happening, sooner or later, it may well be that letting yourself get 2 for 1 is better than the largely unstoppable damage.
And in this case, it's nearly a 3 for 1 because marked by Honor and Heliod's Pilgrim. Although Heliod's Pilgrim really only about half a card because it did replace itself already with that Stab Wound.
Yeah, when we talk about card advantage, in a regular game of Magic, most of the time, you play 1 removal spell to kill one of your opponent's creatures. Someone blocks your creature with 1 creature, they trade off. Any time that you can play 1 card and deal with 2 cards of your opponent or more, that's what we're talking about when we refer to card advantage. And if you get enough of that over the course of a match, there's a very, very good chance that you're winning, because you just have more cards to kill your opponent with that you've sort of saved up from other trades.
Exactly. I mean, that's the most classical version of strong limited play, is just the person who can, you know, abuse the strategy of card advantage better than their opponent, and it's just the overarching strategy of trading cards of your own for more cards of your opponent's.
So there we see a Paragon.
Paragon of the Graves.
Paragon of the Graves for Nikola Vavra. Now, on top of giving all of his black creatures +1/+1, it also means that he's able to give his black creatures Death Touch. Costs 3 mana to do so and taps the Paragon down, but potentially means that were Sam Black to try and mount some sort of big attack, he might be in trouble. Now, in return, Sam Black has Liliana Vest. We saw her in our booth just before this round started, giving us the skinny on what she's going to be doing in the next few weeks and months. But right now, she's in play. We'll find out how many loyalties she's going to end up with soon enough. At the moment, I mean, there's a couple of cards left in Vavra's hand that he's not cast, and he's got plenty of mana to do so. So there's definitely a temptation to force him to discard here.
Yeah,
Equally,
I think
we'll find out if there's an amazing bomb that Sam Black can fetch.
I think ticking her up also forces the issue. I mean, it's going to force his opponent to, it's going to force Nikola Vavra to attack, most likely, and, you know, he has a stab-wounded Heliod's Pilgrim, which he would gladly trade with one of Vavra's creatures, and at this point, it's looking like he's almost certainly going to be able to do that. And that's a great part about Liliana here, is it forces the opponent to get aggressive.
Yeah, Liliana means that he can't just hold on to his removal spells until the exact right moment, because he's going to be losing cards all over the place. And then, on top of that, at some point, I mean, if the ultimate on Liliana Vest goes off, then it's very, very problematic for opponents. And Sam wouldn't need to pull the trigger on that particularly early. He can wait until the graveyard's really nicely stocked and then just say, how on earth are you going to deal with this?
It's the nice thing about Liliana is it's just this huge amount of inevitability that is only going to get stronger now that, you know, your opponent's forced to attack into it. That's one of the reasons why it's so good and limited.
And actually, we started doing a little bit of work in Constructed at the Pro Tour in the sideboards of some of the black-white mid-range decks, such as the one that Ben Friedman was playing, as this incredible answer to the mirror, where you can just say, you know, I can fetch Whip of Erebos and Ghost Council of Orzhova. I can set up these situations where I can have these silver bullets in my deck and find them whenever I need to. And it proved super, super powerful at the Pro Tour last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great sideboard option against the decks where you have the time to set up the combo of Obsidian Ghost Council and Whip of Erebos. And it's also just providing that discard every single turn against decks that can't pressure it. It can grind out a lot of card advantage, which can be super important against the decks that really want to hit land drops 8, 9, and 10 so they can start Sphinx's Revelationing as a win condition.
So for now, it looks like Nikola Vavra is just going to say, well, I can't profitably attack Liliana, so I'm just going to not do so and hope that I can figure something else out. That plan's not going to work in the long term. And Sam Black, each turn, I mean, technically he's behind on life because he's the one that's closer to dying off stab wound, but I can't help but think that actually when you get right down to brass tacks, Sam Black is in a great spot here.
Yeah, I think the Covenant in Blood that I believe is in Sam's hand also makes this race very much in his advantage. I think he can even just dome his opponent with the Covenant of Blood on the turn before he dies and likely win just on the back of that. Yeah,
we've seen sort of various draining effects over the history of Magic. The likes of Soul Feast could only ever target players. The likes of Tendrils of Corruption could only ever target creatures. One of the strengths of Covenant of Blood is it can target both creatures and players. And yeah, sometimes just going to the dome is exactly the right plan.
Yeah, that type of versatility just makes the card very strong, especially when you have cards like Stab Wound that create a lot of incidental damage over time. And incidental damage over time is something that Sam Black absolutely loves to do. I mean, he's the father of Boggart shenanigans.
So that there, a tick up from Liliana, forcing a discard from Nikola Vavra. He discards a Plains, no big worry there. Typhoid Rats from Sam Black is just, you know, another body on board, which is really, it's not even trying to, quote unquote, win the game. It's just trying to keep the game going because Sam Black has a plan, that plan being a timely Covenant in Blood to put away this match. I guess the thing he potentially has to worry about is that a Covenant in Blood from Nikola Vavra right now would actually be, that would be it, right? 4 damage.
Well,
Covenant
no, because
in Blood is,
he can, oh yeah, it would be.
Because Covenant in Blood's a sorcery,
right.
So it would deal 4 damage to Sam Black now, putting him on 2. Even if he has the Covenant in his hand, he then in his upkeep loses to Stab Wound right before he can do his own Covenant. So it's not as if this game is over by any stretch of the measure. There's certainly cards that Nikola Vavra can have that can turn it around, but judging by the time that Vavra is taking over this turn, I think it's probably fairly safe to say that Sam Black is going to get a chance to untap and do something.
I don't think the game is going to end just yet, but stranger things have happened.
I mean, the funny thing is that given those 2 copies
Wow.
of Child of Night, which are now both 4/3s thanks to the second Paragon of Graves, Nikola Vavra actually can gain just a ton of life by attacking, even if he is ultimately losing some creatures to do so.
And those Paragons now pump each other also. So Paragon of Open Graves, also one of the best activated abilities on any of the Paragons. The ability to give any single one of your black creatures Death Touch is very, very strong, because you can just start, trading your Child of Nights for your opponent's 6 or 7 drops, and things get out of hand very quickly.
And we've just found out what the blue splash is there for in Sam Black's deck. That there, Jorobay Murklurker. The activated ability on that one, if you've got Swamps, firstly it's a 2/4, but then you can pay 1 colorless and 1 black to give target creature you control lifelink. And life is something that Sam Black's not super high on right now, so being able to gain a few points incidentally here and there, certainly something that he's going to be quite happy to do. Liliana up to 8 counters though, not far off.
Ticking up slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's something that we don't necessarily see lots of Planeswalker ultimates. I mean, we don't see lots of Planeswalkers, they are mythic rares after all. But 8 loyalty is all that's needed for Liliana Vest to do her ultimate ability, which is to put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Covenant of Blood, though, saying, you know what, sometimes you don't need to go ultimate. Sometimes you just need a bit of burn to the face, and that'll do it.
Yeah, Sam Black, not much of a showman. On camera, has enough loyalty to ultimate as Liliana, decides to just win the game with his Covenant of Blood.
I'd have been pretty tempted.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, it looks like both of our other matches have also both completed their game 1s pretty much simultaneously.
That tends to happen in these, because what happens is that when you finish your game, you look at your teammates' games and you notice that they're in a tense spot because they're at the end of their, or they're at, a sweet spot in their game where it's getting difficult. And then instead of, getting to your next game quickly, you end up watching your teammates' game for a couple minutes
or having a quick talk about sideboarding, or recounting a little bit about things to think about for the next game, just so that everyone can be kind of on the same page. So synchronized magic going on here. No legs in the air waving around, but plenty of cards on the table, and now everyone shuffling up for their game 2s. It looks like currently the team of Sam Black, Matt Severa and Gaudenis Vidugiris is winning the series. They're both, Sam Black and Gaudenis, both a game up. Matt Severa, he dropped his first game to Adam Koska. Koska very much the powerhouse sort of member of the team on the other side of the table. But still plenty of potential for this match to get turned round in total. None of the individual matches decided, meaning that the overall team competition in this round far from complete.
Yeah, this could still go either way. Koska wins his match. All they need is to win one other match, and even now, like, all of them are still very much up in the air. I think that it looks like Sam's deck is better positioned in this matchup. He has more life gain in a long-term kind of grindy match. It just makes sense that he would be able to win. Something that's interesting about that game, though, is had Nikola Vavra known what Sam's deck was capable of, then he definitely could have just attacked with those Child of Nights that were 4/3 lifelinkers, and he wouldn't have lost so easily. However, in doing so, he would have ended up trading the Child of Night and perhaps another creature, and then he'd end up just dying to a Liliana ultimate. So
yeah, it was an interesting one, because basically he put himself on being the person that was winning with Stab Wound and didn't want to jeopardize that by giving Sam Black a way of removing that Stab Wound. Now, ultimately, as it turns out, that judgment call didn't work out for him, but it's a defensible judgment call. But we are now going to see a little bit more of one of the other tables. This being David Mines against Gaudenis Vidugiris. We see Mines on the left there playing red-blue, not got any spells going yet, as opposed to... oh, sorry, this is Adam... Oh, this is Gaudenis, yeah. So we've got a Loyal Cathar and Oreskos Sunguide on the right of our screen. Oh, sorry, Swiftcore on the right of our screen, attacking in for 4 points of damage. Already doing good work on David Mine's life total. And Scrapyard Mongrel there, just a 3/3, no artifacts to power it up. But in red-blue, this the archetype most likely to have a few artifacts to really make this creature shine.
Yeah, I mean, red-blue decks are the decks that want cards like Ensoul Artifact, Scrapyard Mongrel, Hoarding Dragon. Cards that can search up artifacts and really abuse the fact that you're playing them. Aeronaut Tinkerer, another big one.
So raise the alarm there, adding a little bit to Vidugiris' side of the board. We've not yet seen any cards with Convoke or anything, the likes of Sanctified Charge or similar, but one has to think that that's kind of what his deck's trying to achieve. That typically where the green-white decks are trying to go. They're trying to get lots of creatures on the board and then a big pump spell somewhere that's just going to put an opponent far behind. Frostlink's there tapping down Runeclaw Bear, but a second raise the alarm, meaning that Vidugiris well ahead on creatures, getting even more soldier tokens into play. And that means that sooner or later that Loyal Cathar is going to be kind of problematic for David Mines to deal with, because now all of a sudden it can turn 4/1s, 1/1s into 2/2s. That potentially quite a bit of damage. And one can only think that Gaudenis is going to get more creatures pretty shortly.
Yeah, and I mean, he just plays one Sanctified Charge and the game essentially ends from here.
Sanctified Charge, of course, particularly good with white creatures. It gives everything +2/+1, but the first strike, really the point where it just dominates any combat that it's involved with, because assuming you've got a bunch of white creatures, they're basically beating up everything all the time. So David Mines here, stopping having a little bit of a think. He's had a fairly slow start, I think it'd be fair to say. I mean, when your first spell is a 4-drop on turn 4, your next spell is a 3-drop on turn 5, this is not the sort of start that you really want to have against green-white. And he's already a game down, so there's every possibility that this is not an unusual turn of events for the way that Gaudenis Vidugiris deck plays out.
Say Living Totem now.
Yeah, just waiting to see what the counter's going on there. Looks like it's pumping up a soldier. So 1/2/2 soldier that's been promoted over all of the others, taking some sort of a leadership role, and with it gaining a +1/+1 counter.
Call him the cook.
Hey, armies march on their stomachs.
It's true.
And there another Scrapyard Mongrel. So again, just a 3/3 for 4. I mean, it's still bigger than most of Gaudenis Vidugiris' team. The problem is that in terms of players on the pitch, Gaudenis is well ahead. An awful lot of creatures there, able to attack past David Mines if he really wants to. And if that Loyal Cathar does choose to sacrifice itself for the good of the team, then the team will crash through for a huge amount of damage.
And I think that's definitely going to be the play here.
Everything's coming in. What does Mines have? I mean, at best, I feel the best thing that he could have would be something akin to, a block and peel for reality, or a lightning strike, perhaps. He's going to be in rough shape regardless.
Yeah, I think no matter how he makes this block, it's going to be pretty bad for him.
So basically forcing the Cathar to be used now rather than later by a block that's just going to kill it off if there's no tricks. And there we go, there's the sacrifice. Gaudenis Vidugiris team all get +1/+1, so those soldiers, most of them are 2/2s, one of them is a 3/3, and there's a whole host of extra damage coming through, and that enough for the handshake from David Mines. A bit of a patchy draw there from him, meaning that Gaudenis able to secure the first win of this overall series. He takes it 2-0. So we can see here that the Sam Black match basically hasn't really got into game 2 yet, possibly been a mulligan there. Meanwhile, in the middle, the match that hopefully we're going to get a chance to get a little look in on, we've got Adam Koska against Matt Severa that's well underway. So a wall of mulch there, and it looks like this is where our green-white deck is for the middle table.
Ooh, Obelisk of Erd.
Now that's a pretty nice one, especially when you have lots of creatures with a similar creature type. So Frenzied Goblin, now the lone goblin in play after a successful removal spell from Adam Koska's side of things. But yeah, nice to see a few different rares in the feature match area.
That's an exciting one, and that's a card that, you know, normally when we're drafting or playing sealed, we wouldn't be looking at Obelisk. Our decks, sometimes, hypothetically, we could have enough raise the alarms to make it worthwhile, but in a deck that's sealed, it's very reasonable to just think that we're going to have enough goblins to have an Obelisk goblin deck.
Yeah, and so for those of you unfamiliar with the Obelisk, it's a 6-mana artifact, but it's often a lot cheaper because of Convoke. As it comes into play, you choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +2/+2. Now, that's creatures you control, so if your opponent is the same archetype as you, it's not a problem. As it is here, I would guess that he's named goblins. The other side of the board, unlikely to see too many of them, though triplicate spirits means that Adam Koska does have some nice attacks here, which he's able to use to get the first blood on Matt Severa, who already has Koska at 12. Invasive Species and Midnight Guard there from Adam Koska. Lots of creatures in play. Frenzied Goblin, even as a 3/3, not really at his best right here.
No, a bit outclassed. And that's one of the issues when you're playing these Anthem type effects, especially when they're as narrow as Obelisk Averd. It's not a creature. It doesn't trade with anything. So if your opponent is ahead on the board, if your opponent just has more bodies than you, and those bodies can trade with a smaller creature type like goblins, then even if you have this big powerful rare, it just doesn't really do much.
Yeah, Matt Severa, he's had the early advantage. He's kind of used a lot of his cards, Rummaging Goblin coming down from him there. But he's the one that's facing down a clock now, in a way that perhaps wasn't quite true in the early stage of the game that we didn't quite see. Even the Wall of Mulch that Adam Koska has in play at the top of the screen there with a +1/+1 counter is kind of a pain in the neck for Matt Severa. It's now a 1/5. It's not going to kill anything, but it can block everything. And
Yes.
if Severa does ever find a way of dealing with it, then Koska still has the option of cashing it in for a card.
That's one thing that's really nice about Wall Mulch in this spot. I think something that's interesting, though, is that the Frenzied Goblin, you'd expect that to allow Matt Severa to attack into a lot of different boards, but with Triplicate Spirits, it's just not an option anymore.
Yeah, Frenzied Goblin, you can pay red when it attacks to make it so a creature can't block, but with so many more creatures, Adam Koska can just kind of allow for the overlap and prepare additional blockers if he needs to. And in the meantime, these Triplicate Spirits really going to town on Matt Severa here, keep able to get another attack in, drop him down to 14 life, and make life just a little bit tricky for the player in the middle. Worth noting that this is the match where Adam Koska won game 1, and it seems likely that he's going to be able to do the same here. So we're actually going to move across to table A now. So this is the Sam Black match, because if Sam wins this next game, it's over. It doesn't matter what happens in the Koska match. There's no way that can then lead to a victory for his team. And it looks like Sam's had a pretty reasonable start. Heliod's Pilgrim into Mark by Honor. Just a Carrion Crow for Nikola. Vavra here. Not exactly the start that you want when you are game down, backs against the wall.
No, not really. Chris, it does look like he's already been able to deal with a Child of Night, so his draw isn't the absolute worst, and he has a Rotfeaster Maggot here, which is going to, remove that Child of Night from the game.
Just the 1 life gained.
That's fine. The 3/5
tasty
bodies,
morsel.
super relevant here.
Yeah, 3/5. I mean, it's the sort of thing that a 3/5 for 5 in some formats is garbage. It just doesn't do anything of any worth. This format, though, normally 5 toughness, fantastic. A Pillar of Light kind of proving me wrong as I speak, but I would still always be running the Rotfeaster Maggots in my deck if I can help it, because
they're great.
It just solves a lot of the problems that you might face in the format.
Especially because you want to be playing cards like Sign in Blood and Ulcerate. You really need those life gain swings to get back into it when you're taking huge chunks out of your own life total to gain card advantage or to use removal spells really efficiently with your mana.
So Vavra here having a little think about what to do. He's got plenty of lands to work with, a couple of spells in hand. Paragon of the Open Graves, meaning that Carrion Crow is a 3/3 now. So the damage race is a little bit more even than previously we saw, and it does mean that sort of it's not quite as much of a fait accompli that the 3/4 Heliod's Pilgrim from Sam Black is able to just close things out. But we've already seen that Black's deck has plenty of tricks. He's got the double black available to him thanks to a second swamp in his hand. Not going to reveal that before he attacks, though. Quite happy to say, I'm not going to represent anything just yet on the attack, and post-combat, now we got something big.
Ooh.
That looks to me like Avacyn. Now,
yes.
I'm going to read to you exactly what Avacyn does, because the short answer is kind of ends the game, but, you know, the longer answer is a little bit more exciting. So for 2 colorless and 3 white, easy for Sam Black as it turns out, even in his 3-color deck, you get a 5/4 flying vigilance creature. Pretty good start, right?
Not too bad.
For 1 colorless and 1 white mana, you can prevent all damage that we dealt to another target creature of your this turn by sources of a color of your choice.
Well, Pillar of Light deals with Avacyn quite handily, yes.
I didn't even have to read the 7-mana ability, which is on the screen for you there. Prevent all damage to be dealt to target player by sources of the color of your choice. As it is, Pillar of Light is the absolute cornerstone of this game.
Yeah, I think, you know, Sam has Pillar of Light, Nikola has Pillar of Light. Pillar of Light, just an incredible card in the team sealed format. People are going to have strong cards. You're not going to play against somebody whose deck is just a pile of 2-drops. They're going to have something like a Curd Chieftain, something like Avacyn, something like a Soul, and nothing quite deals with any of those as well as Pillar of Light does.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those funny removal spells. It's a bit like Radiant's Judgment to me, that it only kills powerful cards, but they're exactly the cards that you want to kill.
Yeah, I mean, it's much better than Radiant's Judgment because of the just the way the format works and how, you know, people win with toughness. Like, the way you win in M15 Limited is by having a ton of toughness on your creatures. So Pillar of Light is just perfect at dismantling anybody's plan to take a game away.
So that was a huge mind rot that we saw there from Nikola Vavra. There were exactly 2 cards left in Sam Black's hand. Those 2 cards were Unmake the Graves and Gravedigger. So basically a whole ton of ways of generating card advantage by getting lots of creatures back from your graveyard. Now, Pillar of Light had obviously completely exiled Avacyn, kind of ideal, but on top of that, Mind Rot as a follow-up, able to say, no, you're not getting back any of these creatures, I'm just going to start beating you up, and beating you up pretty savagely with a Necrogen Scudder, currently a 4/4, thanks to Paragon of the Open Graves. 6 mana, there's Covenant of Blood. Oh, sorry, 7 mana. Yep, there we go. Covenant of Blood plus a big attack. Sam Black, he's not dead yet, but he's certainly not as alive as he was at the start of that turn. Wow.
Not at all. I mean, now down to 8 here. Typhoid Rat's going to try to stem the bleeding a bit, but Necrogen Scudder is just a 2-turn clock here.
Yeah, I mean, the Mind Rot follow-up to Pillar of Light, just absolutely crushing here, and Sam Black scoops them up. He knows he's not winning that one. So Gaudenis Vidugiris had won 2-0. Sam Black is now squared at 1-1, and it looks like the Adam Koska game is still going on. Those, well, 2 of the 3 triplicate spirits still in play, but that looks like a Soul of Theros that's been doing a little bit of work for Adam Koska there.
And Soul of Theros, one of the most powerful rares in Magic 2015. A card that can just completely break games wide open, especially when it's played alongside things like Triplicate Spirits, Raise the Alarm, and just any bodies in general.
Very intrigued as to how Matt Severa was able to both deal with Soul of Theros and then force the exile and still have the life totals be as safe as they are. Maybe that we're going to find out a slight update. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 4 life seems a little bit, 4 to 27 seems a bit more reasonable if you've had to deal with a Soul of Theros. The big shining avatar there has done a huge amount of work on Matt Severa's life total. And this could be Adam Koska squaring up our match.
It looks like it from this spot.
Yeah, 4 life means that Matt Severa having to be on the defensive. He's got Illusionary Angel. That Amphin Path Mage potentially gives him a route to victory, but realistically, Matt Severa has to be on the defensive, at least for now. And if I were Koska, I'd now be in the position of saying, I don't mind throwing a few creatures away to sneak a few points of damage around your creatures.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, one of the most interesting things about a card like Amphin Path Mage is that it's so very strong when you're on offense or when your opponent's life total is low. But when you're on defense, when your life total is dwindling, the card becomes much, much weaker. And as a result, it's a good card to be malleable in your limited decks. If you're looking for a card to take out of your deck and you're playing against a very aggressive deck and Amphin Path Mage is in your main, then that should be one of the first cards you consider to cut there.
So Adam Koska wins his match 2-0. Gaudenis Vidugiris wins his match 2-0. That means that effectively the entirety of this match is going to come down to just this last game between Nikola, Vavra and Sam Black. Both of these players have kind of similar decks in a way. Essentially, they're both black-white decks. Sam Black has a small blue splash for that
Draw by Merklurker. He may have other cards too that we haven't seen. It's definitely a possibility.
But now, effectively, this is going to be one game of 3-on-3.
Yes.
The hive mind fully at work. And the interesting thing here, I mean, for a kickoff, the person who's holding the cards has the final say. You can't stop someone from doing things. You're not allowed to be the one that suddenly taps all of your teammates' mana and throws one of the cards in their hand on the table. It doesn't work that way. But you can certainly...
You can actually get in trouble for that.
Absolutely you can. But at the same time, you can strongly suggest certain lines of play. And in some respects, that's a massive boon. In other respects, it can be quite difficult for you because actually you're giving away information by any kind of communication that you do. So, I mean, I was talking to the team of Jelga Vigashma, Matt Costa and Jamie Park yesterday, and they were basically saying, we trust each other. We're all good players. We all know how to play this game. We've all been testing together for a long time. We might ask each other on mulligans. We might, you know, suggest a few bits and pieces here and there, but we've not had a chance to watch all of every game. We're not going to jump in unless we see something that we think is a real kind of egregious...
Yeah, something that somebody is obviously missing.
Yeah.
And those are the times where you really need to jump in. And most of the time you should let your friend play the game how they see fit. You know, if you are not the type of person that plays that type of deck often, and they are, then they probably understand the texture of the game better than you do. Also, they've been in the game the whole time.
Yeah.
You might just be joining the game in the middle of something and not be able to make the same assumptions that they can make based on what's happened previous in the game.
Yeah, you might have the read from game one that they can't possibly have drawn Appeal from Reality at any point because they would have played it. And even though you've not seen it, you don't think they have it. You don't necessarily want to have that conversation with your teammates while your opponent is listening to you. There's no adequate way of sharing all the information of being in a match if someone's not been in that match the whole time.
Yeah, one of the most important pieces of information that they can share with each other, however, is what cards they've seen from players whose colors might have overlapped. So, you know, if you have an opponent who's white-blue, for example, and then one of the other decks on their team is white-red, then, you know, if you see a bunch of Triplicate Spirits in the white-red deck, then when you're playing against the white-blue deck, you're not going to expect to see those Triplicate Spirits because those cards that went in the one deck. And Triplicate Spirits might not even be the best example because some people might want to split up power, but something like Peel from Reality, for example, is a great card that it's a great card for many decks, and then it's terrible in other decks. And when you see it in one of the other team's decks, even if they have another blue deck, you don't know. You know that it's not going to be there because they're building their deck a certain way. The same way, if you see a blue deck that has a bunch of creatures that come into play abilities, then the other blue deck will not have Peel from Reality.
Got it.
I kind of went down a rabbit hole there. I apologize.
I think we just about made it on the other side. We didn't see any bottles that were labeled "Drink Me." I think we're just about going to be able to survive that one. Let's see who's able to survive this last game, though, because it is onto a decider. We got Nikola Vavra on the left of our screen, Sam Black on the right. Let's see what shakes out. Just a swamp on a go there from Sam Black, mirrored by Nikola Vavra immediately. Both players appear to have their land drops just fine, and Evolving Wilds there for Sam, meaning he's going to be able to find whatever he needs at the end of the turn. There he goes. Black and a white for Nikola Vavra, the exact same there for Sam Black.
It looks like Vavra hasn't found a third land yet, but he does have Mind Rot, again, on the draw. And this is one thing that I really like about what Vavra's done here, is we didn't see Mind Rot from him in Game 1, but in Game 2 he was on the draw, and he had Mind Rot, and he was able to get huge value off of it.
Absolutely.
Now we're seeing, again, on the draw, Mind Rot. Huge value there. And I think sideboarding in Mind Rot when you're on the draw is an excellent choice when playing Magic 2015 Limited.
Absolutely, and a Typhoid Rat's there. The first play of the game here for Sam Black. A 1-1 with Death Touch. Not exactly right on time. That's generally you want your 1-drops on turn 1, unless there's something strange going on. But Certainly not unhappy to see it now. Late to the party, but still potentially got a little bit to give, because let's face it, no one showed up early this time round. Everyone's fashionably late.
And Typhoid Rat's the kind of one-drop that's fine to come down whenever, because it's always going to trade with something.
And it looks like Nikola Vavra there having to discard at the end of his turn, discarding Paragon of the Open Graves. Island there for Sam Black and an attack there, taking Nikola Vavra down to 19. And Liliana Vess is in Sam Black's hand. It looked like there might have been a Scuttling Doom Engine as well there.
I think I also saw a Scuttling Doom Engine there.
Typhoid Rats on both sides. Looks like we may see Sam Black here a little bit short on black mana. I can see that there's a Plains in his hand, but possibly not the swamp that he really wants.
It's a shame that he can't add his last name to his mana pool.
Absolutely. His devotion to black, bigger than many, but he's got a Crippling Blight there to kill off his opponent's Typhoid Rats, keep on swinging in, and 4 mana up, passes the turn, and immediately we see Vavra looking to work out what he's going to discard. It looks like it might be that Mind Rot. There we go. Sam Black not too unhappy, sorry, to see that card hit the Grumper, and there's the second black. So is he going to go for Liliana Vess, or is he going to go one bigger, one better with a Scuttling Doom Engine?
I imagine he's probably going to lead with the Liliana because it makes the game just so difficult to lose. But there's definitely an argument to be made for Scuttling Doom Engine here.
Yeah, I mean, the Scuttling Doom Engine, while it's in play, obviously a gigantic threat, a 6/6 for 6. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, so even if that Typhoid Rats had been around, it wouldn't have been able to block it. If for whatever reason it does get killed off, though, it's going to deal 6 damage to your target opponent. Only one opponent in this exact game, even though it's a team's match.
That's true, although he had seen at least one Pillar of Light from his opponent earlier on in the match.
Well, I mean, that exiles it, though, so that's still not going to deal 6 damage. So here, I mean, he's in a great spot. He's got triple white, which means that after he casts Liliana, if he wants, he can -2 to fetch Avacyn and just really sort of put the boot in if needed. Alternatively, yeah, go to work on Nikola Vavra's hand. In the meantime, though, attack him for 7. There's Liliana. You've still got 2 lands, and I'm going to be searching up something pretty good. Now, with Liliana, you don't need to reveal to your opponent what you're fetching, but I'm pretty sure that he just fetched Avacyn there. It looked a little bit that way to me. And if I were Nikola Vavra, I would, in the dark, call that that was the card that he fetched.
Yeah, and he's not afraid of giving information away anymore. This is the last game of the entire match. It's probably Avacyn, but he could have another bomb in his deck. It could be something like Soul of Theros, even.
Oh, my. And we saw a Soul of Theros on the other side for Adam Koska, but... So there's the Pillar of Light. The best answer to Scuttling Doom Engine that you're likely to find. He has the 3 mana, so step 1 achieved, Scuttling Doom Engine dealt with. Typhoid Rats nibbling away there, the Black Lava Axe. But in the meantime, what are we going to see from Sam Black here? It's got to be tempting to stick Avacyn in play, right? Nope. First up, he's going to search for something else. Covenant of Blood?
A Covenant of Blood could be a good choice here.
And he's got the lands to use it. And ultimately, he's just looking to shorten the clock and sort of secure this win in a fairly decisive way. He's looking at the Murklurk. He's asking his team. That looks like it might have been a Meteorite. Not 100% on that one. Suffice to say, if it matters, we'll see it. If it doesn't matter, Sam Black's probably won anyway. Certainly unafraid of any attacks on Liliana Vess there. There's Avacyn. The card that got fetched gets put on the top of his deck for next turn. What have you drawn, Nikola Vavra? What are you going to do with this mess? Is that another Pillar of Light?
It seems like it is, yes.
And one of the teammates there giving a little read to Avacyn. He's like, you got time to do that now. She's exiled.
And I mean, this is the argument for leading with Liliana. Certainly, Sam's still in a great spot here. It's not like he can really lose in many different ways. But if you do lead with Liliana and then just start taking it up right away, I think the game is automatically won when your opponent has 2 lands in play. Just getting a Planeswalker up to that amount of loyalty in a game of Limited, especially when it's a Planeswalker that actually grinds card advantage and has a super relevant ultimate, it's just too much to handle. And given his opponent hasn't hit a 4th or 5th land drop on appropriate turns, it doesn't matter, but it could have.
So Heliod's Pilgrim there, fetching Mark by Honor for the Typhoid Rats. the most honourable of rats, and swinging in for 3 vigilance each turn. Nikola Vavra on a 2-turn clock here.
Yeah, I think we really need to call the flavor police about this one, because I don't know many rats that have been marked by honor.
So, I think rats get a kind of a bad rap. You know, I've got friends who've had pet rats.
Yeah,
Rats are just really friendly, nice animals. But I can see your point. Yeah, not necessarily known for their sense of honor. But now, trying to redress that balance here at Grand Prix Portland, marked by honor on Sam Black's Typhoid Rats there. Gravedigger getting back something for Nikola Vavra here. Let's see what he's got. There's plenty in there. There's a Paragon of the Open Graves, which is now castable. Seems like potentially a good choice. Anything else in there? He's gone for a Typhoid Rats of his own. Seems like a fine choice to be able to potentially cast 2 threats next turn. But Sam Black desperately trying to sort of finish things off here. He's got the Durable Merc Lurker at the front of his hand.
Yeah, it's pretty rough for Nikola at this point. When you finally hit your 4th land drop and you use it to recoup some of your losses that you've discarded into your graveyard and not to actually advance your board state in a relevant manner, it's pretty rough.
And Vavra here down to just 3 life after that attack. He's able to kill off Heliod's Pilgrim, but that's not really the operative issue for him, because the main problem is he's on just 3 life.
It's on 3 life. His opponent has a significantly better board, more lands in play, a Planeswalker ticking up.
Yeah,
just a generally very bad scene for him.
And if you're Sam Black now, it's all just a matter of not doing anything hasty and finding a way of losing the unlosable game. On camera, actually, forget the camera. One thing that you have in team tournaments is you have your teammates watching you. And in some respects, that's the best spur to discipline that you can possibly have. I can't help but wonder how much better my Magic play would be if I always had 2 of my best friends that are great at Magic watching me play every single play and tutting
and being
every time
in it. Yes.
I screw up.
I think that's an excellent point about team play, is that you suddenly have to play for your teammates in a way that, when you lose, you're not just losing for yourself, you're betraying friends of yours in a way. Need to play strong.
I mean, it's not as if Sam Black's ever really not playing strong there, using Unmake the Graves to get a couple of creatures back from his graveyard there at the end of turn. And there he's got the Heliod's Pilgrim. It's fetching a stab wound. Effectively, the sort of twisting the knife on Nikola Vavra here, because Vavra's never really been in this game, has he?
No. Not at all.
And Liliana fetching, I'm going to call it as Covenant of Blood.
Yes, that seems pretty good in this spot here.
I mean, effectively, all he's looking for at this point is to close out the game. He's already seen that his opponent has somehow been able to draw bits and pieces and so on to give him a potential chance to do something. He just wants to end it real quick and real simple. So Nikola Vavra now on 4 life.
I think he's actually a 1.
No, he blocked the 3/3 rats.
Oh, well, the turn before when it's not relevant anymore, but I think he was actually a 1 there.
Okay.
From the life total was wrong before the attack.
I see. So Sam Black there taking the match. He beats Nikola Vavra 2-1. Gaudenis Vidugiris beats David Mines 2-0. And in spite of his victory, Adam Koska looking a little upset there. He somehow got the 2-0, but it wasn't enough because the rest of his team couldn't find a second win between them. That meaning that the team